time for our Week 13 preview. We're going to go ahead and get into our first game. Hawaii taking on UNLV in Las Vegas. I've got the final score of this one being 38-28. I like Anthony Calandria against Michael Alejado and the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors. I think that the passing attack from UNLV is just slightly better than what Hawaii brings to the table. I think UNLV actually can run the ball. Hawaii hasn't been so great running the ball this year. It's not going to be a battle of defenses, to say the least. Both these teams are 7+ wins in the win column right now, so they're doing pretty solid right now. But I really don't like either team's defensive game plan throughout this season. They've been giving up a ton of yards and a ton of points. Hawaii might be slightly better on that front, but I feel a lot better about UNLV being able to move the ball on the ground and through the air in this one. They probably won't have a problem putting up points. I bet that Hawaii will have a tough time moving the ball on the ground in this one, and that'll probably make a difference for them. Leaning solely on the pass may actually help UNLV play some defense because the only decent part of their defense is their secondary.
Yeah, I like UNLV as well. I feel like defense is going to be mainly absent. I feel like both teams are going to pretty much do whatever they want to. And I like UNLV 42-38 to come out on top, shootout.
Yeah, I took a little bit lower of a score than I was thinking I should on this one. I feel like this one could get ridiculous with the points. I mean, I would take the over for sure, but there's always a chance that both teams just don't play up to their standard on offense. That could happen, but I think both teams will play well on offense and we'll see a lot of points.
Hold on, one more thing on this. I'm going to actually see what the over under is because I bet it's really high.
This probably would be one of the highest over-unders of the game.
64 and a half.
I figured this would be one of the highest over-unders of the season. It's definitely got to be up there. I mean, considering how many points a game UNLV has allowed this season, still being 8-2, that just says that all of their games probably hit the over.
Yeah, I mean, that's just absurd.
It's
They actually
unreal.
didn't. Their game last week wasn't a crazy shootout or nothing. They beat Utah State 29-26 in double overtime. So that's the first game that they have a top 30 in the whole season. That's crazy.
Wow, unbelievable. Well, I picked them to make the playoffs in the preseason. They haven't been horrible, but they've been a disappointment. So,
They had a defense, they'd be right there.
yeah, they are the second best Rebels in the country, that's for sure. So, I'm looking forward to this game. I actually probably will tune in for it. I think it's probably going to be one of those late night games with a lot of points.
It's Friday night, so stand alone.
Those are always fun. I'll probably tune in for that. Our next game, SMU at Louisville. I've got SMU taking this one 29-24. I feel like Kevin Jennings is clearly the better quarterback here. He's one of the top leading passers in the country. Struggled with a little bit of interception issue this season, just like last year, but I think he's been playing better football despite the fact that his team around him may not be as good as last year.
Yeah, I mean they lost a lot on defense from seasons ago, and that's the big thing in this game too is how their secondary performs. I know Miller Moss hasn't been great, but they have some weapons. I think they'll exploit that enough to stay in this game, but SMU being at home really need this one to stay in the ACC race. Louisville's already played their way out of that, so I like SMU 27-24 to defend the home turf.
Yeah, I think that the profile that stands out to me is inconsistency of Miller Moss against defenses that put a lot of pressure on him. SMU is not a great defense, but they do put a lot of pressure on the quarterback and
That's
they create
true.
turnovers. So I think that this game profiles as one of those ones where Miller Moss may have a lot of big plays. Chris Bell is a solid receiver. They'll find some plays through there, and their running backs have been getting some serious yards. Like the last game I watched, even though they lost, I think they were getting like 10 yards a carry with one of their backs before he got hurt. So they've got some studs in the backfield. Even though they've had a lot of injuries there, they're running the ball well. So there's a recipe for Louisville to win this ball game, but I feel like SMU's just got so much more firepower, and they can lean on that pass rush maybe to create some interceptions and get some big plays on defense in this game. I think that's the difference. SMU on top by 5 points for me. Missouri takes on Oklahoma in Norman. I've got the final score being a little bit more low scoring than probably most people do. I have Oklahoma winning this game 20-13, just based off of the feeling that neither of these teams are going to be airing out the ball. I think whoever shows up with the best defense in this game wins. It's that simple. Oklahoma has a tall task in stopping Ahmad Hardy, who's probably one of the best running backs, if not the best, in the whole country right now. coming off of a hot performance of 300 yards and 3 touchdowns against your own Mississippi State Bulldogs, Landon. Ahmad Hardy is virtually unstoppable if they can get that play action pass game going. So if Matt Zollers plays good football, Oklahoma may be in for some serious trouble in this game, but I just don't see that happening.
I think they're still just too one dimensional to go on the road and beat a team with a defense like Oklahoma. So I like Oklahoma 24-14 here.
Yeah, I really do like the receivers that Missouri's got. Kevin Coleman is a really solid player, and I wanted the best for him after seeing him transfer, but this offense is just not giving him the output that he deserves with the kind of player that he is. I think looking back on it, he probably would have picked a different school to transfer to, at least if he wanted a better
Should
production
have
on the
stayed at
season.
state.
I think he would have cooked at State. I think if he had gone somewhere like Alabama or Ole Miss, he would have cooked too. But regardless, all of those teams have good receivers, so he could have gotten buried on the depth chart at one of those teams. He really stands out at Missouri as probably one of their best receivers. Overall, though, this game actually, both these teams are pretty similar to me, except offensively they're slightly different. They each have a key player on offense that can move the ball with their legs. John Mateer is probably the best runner on Oklahoma's football team, and he's the quarterback. And then you look at Missouri, and Ahmad Hardy is pretty much the whole offense right now. So those two players had the biggest impact on scoring in this game. I'm probably taking Oklahoma and John Mateer to find some passing touchdowns and explosives on a somewhat susceptible Missouri secondary, but Missouri's defensive line can get after you too, and we saw what
They
Ole Miss
can.
was able to do against Oklahoma at Oklahoma. They got pressure with a average defensive line, so I'm sure Drink is looking at that as the kind of coach that he is, and he's going to want to take advantage of that schematically against them. So if they want any chance in this game, they're going to have to wreak havoc on John Mateer and make sure that his line is held back there in the backfield. Still like Oklahoma, though, that defense is just so good. I think that they find a way to slow down Ahmad Hardy. Looking at the blueprint that Alabama laid out for them in that game when they played Missouri, I think they'll probably find something that is pretty similar to that in their own right and probably bottle him up in this game. USC takes on Oregon in Eugene. I have Oregon with a final score of 35-31. I think it's going to be a great game. I don't remember the last time that Oregon and USC played that was really memorable to me. This is shaping up to be probably the biggest Oregon USC game in a while. Both teams have playoff aspirations. USC is kind of hanging in the balance. They have to win this game to stay in it. Oregon loses this game. Not only do they have USC vault above them, but they don't really have that many big games left on the schedule. This is kind of it for them. So
They have a road trip to Washington, but Washington has really fallen off since that Wisconsin game and
yeah,
lost any respect they had.
unless chaos ensues, I think Oregon also kind of has to win this game to make the playoffs. I mean, considering how their schedule lays out, this game and the Penn State game and the Indiana game were the biggest games on their schedule. So I think they have to win this one. So I mean, they had the Iowa game recently, which they won very closely. That was a big game, but I feel like this game's a bigger game. Having this at home, you've got to win. It's a no brainer win. You got to be able to pull this out. Both teams present elite quarterback play, elite wide receivers. Makai Lemon is, in my opinion, probably the best receiver in college football right now. He just put up an insane performance against Iowa last week. Not many players have those kinds of outputs against Iowa, but he did. In a come from behind fashion, they won that football game. So both these teams coming off of a fresh win against Iowa, playing some tough football, having to win in a way that they're not used to winning in. I think this game's going to be really close. I think these teams are both as sharp as they're going to be all season. Hopefully, they'll be both healthy. I think Kenyon Sadiq's been battling some injuries. Corey Moore has been battling injuries for Oregon. Like to see them come back in this game and make a huge impact. Dante Moore needs a huge bounce back game. He's got all the talent and all the tangibles. I expect him to play well against an average to below average USC defense per Lincoln Riley football teams. I don't expect them to be very clutch here. I think Oregon wins this one close.
I want to pick USC so bad, but I just can't. It's really tough to pick against Oregon at home. I know they did lose to Indiana at home this year, but losing two home games in the same year, a team like that, I just don't feel like that's going to be something that happens. But I do think it'll be close. So I got Oregon 28-24 eking this one out.
Yeah, I really like this game. I think this is the most intriguing game to me on the whole slate for this week. I'm really looking forward to that one. Next, we have Pitt taking on Georgia Tech in Atlanta. I have Georgia Tech with a final score of 31-24, taking a one-score win against Pitt. After watching Pitt play against Notre Dame, I don't know if what Pat Narduzzi was saying was real or not, but if conference games are that much more important, then they should show up for this one because this one matters a lot. They can beat Georgia Tech right here, get a statement rank win, and take their spot in the conference championship if they can finish out the season with a win against Miami. I don't like their odds, to be honest with you. I don't think they win either of those games. You feel pretty good about them having a chance in the Miami game. I think it's possible. At best, I think they split, but I feel like Georgia Tech's offense is going to be too much for them. I don't think they're able to keep up. Mason's going to have his best game of the entire season, probably throw for over 400 if they want to beat Georgia Tech. Because Georgia Tech is leading the nation in yards per game right now, and they're scoring a ton of points. So defense doesn't even really have to be a factor if you can do what they're doing on offense.
Yeah, I like Georgia Tech too. They've played really well at home this year, and I don't think Pitt's that great of a team. I know they had the 5 game win streak, or was it 6?
It was somewhere around that.
5 or 6 doesn't matter, but they really didn't play anybody great during that stretch. I do still think they beat Miami though, just because I just think Miami's due to choke another game, and that was at home last week of the year. Weird game, but I'll talk about that more when we actually pick that. But I like Georgia Tech at home here, 38-28 to beat a Pitt team that was a little inflated coming into this weekend last week.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. I'm not loving that team as a whole right now. I think they've got too many issues as far as running the ball and defensively. They're just not really putting it all together right now. They're pretty one dimensional. So I'd happily take Georgia Tech and Haynes King in this one. They have a huge win, vault them into their final game taking on Georgia in Atlanta again. So that's a huge game. Georgia Tech somehow wins that. We're gonna be having a crazy conversation going into conference championship week. It's a rivalry game. No telling what could happen. Like last year, we could have an insane game, but I think Georgia Tech probably will drop that game and end up being 10-2 heading into conference championship week. Next, we've got Tennessee taking on Florida in the swamp in a classic rivalry game. I think if you had told me in the preseason that when we got to this game that Tennessee would have been relevant at one point, only to end up choking a couple of really close games, and Florida was never going to be relevant, and they would be in the pits the whole season and fire Billy Napier. I would have been pretty surprised that that's where this game would be this late in the season. Florida entering this game with a 3-7 record. It's hard to believe that's where we're at right now with this Florida team. We were talking about Arkansas earlier. We couldn't believe Arkansas was 2-8. I really do think that both these teams have some serious flaws that make it hard for them to win in really, really competitive games. But overall, as far as talent's concerned, they're significantly more talented than teams in the bottom or in the really even just the bottom third of most of these other conferences. Florida and Arkansas and Auburn are all just talented enough to beat probably middle of the pack teams in almost all of the other conferences. And there's plenty of arguments to be made there. You can get into as much of them as you want, but that's my personal opinion. With where we're at with this game, I have a hard time picking Florida to win this one. They show up really randomly to play competitive football in games that honestly they have no business being competitive in. Tennessee should run away with this game by several touchdowns. But since it's at Florida, it's a rivalry. I'm only going to take Tennessee to win this one 37-28. So that's a 9 point win. It's technically two possessions. I'm not entirely confident in that, to be honest with you. I see a scenario where Tennessee does probably win by more than two scores, but I just don't feel comfortable with that. I think Tennessee's probably going to play this game pretty tight there till the end and then secure a win.
Every fiber of my being wants to pick Florida in this game. That's really how I feel, but I just can't do it. I can't do it. They have had a few close games here recently against Ole Miss and Georgia, and it feels like they're due to break through and snatch another one. Kind of like they did against Texas. But I can't pick it. It would not surprise me at the least bit at all if they pull it off. But I'm going to take Tennessee to hold on and win this one, 31-28.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the strength of record of Tennessee right now, and genuinely can't think of any really, really big wins for them. The overtime win in Starkville matters because that was an away game. They were able to pull out a huge win in that kept their season virtually alive at the moment. being able to be in that situation in Gainesville, I'd like Tennessee in a close one if it came down to it. But like you said, it feels like Florida probably should be due for a win. I'd favor them a lot more likely against Florida State in a rivalry game to end the season than this one.
You know if they get to host that or not?
I do not. I genuinely don't think it matters because I doubt there will be many fans at that game,
I think they
regardless.
win.
I think Florida. Okay, it depends on which version of Florida shows up because a lot of people only remember the one that showed up against Kentucky.
I think their best show up against Florida State. Surely.
I think that we'll get a good version of Florida in one of these last two games because if Ole Miss and Georgia have to get the best version of Florida, then I think that Florida State should too. So and Tennessee, we'll see. I think this team's got the athletes that if they can find a competitive streak in one of these last two games, can get a win. But they're out of the bowl conversation and they're at this point just playing for pride and NIL money down the road. So got Florida taking another loss here to fall to 3-8. Finally, we've got BYU at Cincinnati for a Big 12 clash and a Big 12 title elimination game. BYU is probably in the driver's seat right now to be the second team in behind Texas Tech. If they lose this one, don't know what the tiebreaker scenarios are and who would be next up. I think probably Utah, but Cincinnati technically I think still has a path. But I think a lot of chaos would have to happen. Um, Regardless, I'm taking BYU in this one. I have them winning 45-28. As much as I want Cincinnati to really be competitive and even win this game, which I was earlier in the season when we were talking about Cincinnati and maybe BYU being a fraud, I thought Cincinnati could win this game. I don't like what I saw from them last week against Arizona and then how they played against Utah. I don't have any faith that they can play the kind of ball that BYU is going to play. I mean, that ground and pound complementary football, it absolutely terrorized TCU last week. I genuinely don't think that Cincinnati's that much better than TCU. So, as far as physicality standpoint, I don't think they are either. I think BYU is able to do what they want to do on offense. Maybe Cincinnati's able to find something later in this game to make it look a little closer, but I think BYU might dominate this game.
I think Cincinnati's going to turn in a much better performance than last week against Arizona. But I don't think it's going to be enough against BYU. BYU is great at winning these close games with a low margin for error. So I feel like they're going to go on the road, get a big one here to get to 10-1, 28-27 though.
That's pretty tight. Yeah, I mainly picked the blowout just because of what we've been seeing from Cincinnati and the way they've been trending and how I saw BYU respond against TCU. I thought that they could drop that game. TCU's not a bad football team, but they responded, man. They put a spanking on TCU.
They've been kind of spiraling though. They were 6-1, now they're 6-4.
Yeah, and I think that they got to the meat of their schedule, and that's really what's starting to show. I still think they're decent, but I just think that BYU's got so much more talent and they're so much more well coached right now than a majority of these Big 12 teams. They're dominating teams that they're better than. Arizona might be the only game that was questionable, and Arizona is currently 7-3, who just had a ranked win against Cincinnati. So you look at common opponents, they both played pretty similar games against Arizona, except BYU actually won. So, if anything, if you want to use the common opponent talking point, BYU's got an advantage there. I just overall, even if that wasn't in the conversation, I think that BYU's probably going to be the better football team all around in this one. Quarterback, maybe the only advantage I think Cincinnati's got in this one. All right, I think that's going to do it for this week of the Feel for the Game podcast. We will not be attending any games this week, considering what our options were. We just didn't want to travel for any of these games. They're kind of out of our price range and not really games that we could get excited about spending several $100s for. So we're going to chill out, watch a lot of football, start preparing for next week's podcast, and just enjoy relaxing for a little bit. Starting to get close to hunting season, so hopefully we can get some cooler weather coming in and find some time to get in the deer stand. That it would be best case scenario for me, but with Mississippi weather, you just never know what's going to happen. So we'll be back next week with episode 14, heading into rivalry week. We will be visiting the Egg Bowl on Friday of next week, so that'll be our next stop. Very excited about that. I feel like this podcast has kind of culminated to the Egg Bowl, just considering how we started.
Or who we go for, yeah.
It's pretty exciting. Like we've said several times, neither of us have been to our team winning an Egg Bowl, and we'll both be there in
We're both
Starkville.
0-2.
Both 0-2.
Yeah.
So one of us is going to get to see our team finally win an Egg Bowl. And with the Egg Bowl, you just never know what's going to happen. So we're going to be looking at a pretty interesting game, and we'll be kind of tracking the whole Lane Kiffin drama heading into that if that has a factor in what's going to happen there. So really excited about that, but that's going to do it for us this week.